Last year, no? The format.
Yes, yes. Our break. What we are also the city center right now.
Good morning, dear Mrs. Khan Bonvia, Director of the Catalan Agency for Development Cooperation, dear Mr. Joseph Guni, Director, dear representative of public institutions, Rector, Rector Manager of International Relations Offices and Professor of Universities, Director and member of Research and Technology Institutes, students, ladies and gentlemen, let me express my sincere gratitude to the Global University Network for Innovation for having organized this second debate with the GUNI group of experts and the presentation of its second report on such important topic as SDGs and higher education. And thank you for inviting the Secretariat of the Union for the Mediterranean to participate. It's a pleasure for us to cooperate with GUNI and to strengthen this very fruitful partnership that we initiated 2 years ago on occasion of the International Conference on Sustainable Development Goals and that we continued last year with the creation of an expert group in this domain. In the context of all these initiatives, the UFM Secretariat has tried to give voice to experts coming from the Euro-Mediterranean region, and in particular from the Southern Mediterranean Rim, always with an eye to ensure the visibility of human and youth perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, higher education, including vocational training, research and innovation, are priority areas in the mandate of the Union for the Mediterranean. Since its establishment and as indicated in the UFM Roadmap for Action adopted by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of all the Member States. These fields are indeed essential to respond to the unprecedented challenges faced by the Mediterranean region, such as the need to improve youth employment and to prevent radicalization and terrorism through the promotion of intercultural dialogue, but also to combat the environmental and climatic defeats, among many others. In particular, the activities of the UFM Secretariat in the area of higher education and research aim to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal, the SDG 4 and the SDG 8, to reduce the proportion of youth not in employment, education or training, the needs, and the SDGs where research and innovation play a crucial role. Higher education and research are shaping factors of a common and prosperous Mediterranean future, and the UFM, with more than 15 labeled projects, is working to the implementation of the SDGs at the higher education institutions. More concretely, in this year, for the higher education field, the UFM Secretariat will focus on promoting academic mobility, enhancing the recognition of degrees and study periods, and promoting access to quality education and training system for all, preparing for labor market needs in a changing world of work, and improving the school-to-work transition. We aim at enhancing our role as a regional platform for Mediterranean higher education and youth mobility. Indeed, mobility has always been at the core of the UFM strategy because of its capacity to boost creativity, the flows of ideas, and the reinforcement of mutual understanding. For that, the UFM Secretariat will organize the second edition of the UFM Mobility Week in partnership with some institutions and university networks as the Mediterranean University Union, the UNIMED, and the Euro-Mediterranean University, EMONI, and GUNI itself. Also, the UFM Secretariat will assess the feasibility of launching a regional dialogue on higher education and the accessibility of higher education in the UFM countries, maximizing interaction and synergy among regional university and research centers by becoming a focal point for collaboration among all these stakeholders. In the field of research and innovation, the UFM Secretariat will focus on encouraging links between training and research centers of the northern and southern shores of the Mediterranean, and promoting research and innovation in the area of the agri-food system, blue economy, migration, and integration and environment. In this context, the UFM Secretariat will co-organize with the Director General for Research and Innovation the launching event of the Horizon Europe program for the Southern Mediterranean countries to support networking and collaborative research across the whole Euro-Mediterranean region, in view to increase the level of applications submitted by Euro-Mediterranean countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we encourage all the participants in this important event, important actors involved in higher education in the Mediterranean region and in the world, to delve into the topic that occupies us today in order to be shed some light on it. Let me to conclude my speech by wishing to all of you very fruitful and aspiring discussions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Bon dia, good morning. Um, um, I'm gonna be a little bit maybe not very sure about what I'm saying because my presentation was in Catalan, so I'm gonna try to translate directly because I thought that otherwise you wouldn't understand. So there's a lot of people here that should be just understanding what we are saying. Okay. So first of all, I think that I'm very happy to be here in this second. It's already the second publication from the GUNI group of experts. It's been, I think, a pleasure to meet all of us through this group, through this group, and I think that's very important. The focus that we made, that was, we were talking about barriers, challenges, things like that, and then we said, no, we have to talk about challenges, but also about things that already have been done, because we are in this moment that we are not just only thinking about, but doing things. So I think it was a good transformation of the proposal of this new publication. First of all, I want to thank the team of GUNI and ACUP because they are just really powerful, and they just push us every day to do better and to work hard. For instance, yesterday we had the chance to take a look at almost 180 papers presented for the next Congress. So it was quite a hard job, but it was great. I think that we shared a lot of ideas. It was a good thing to be done, and we did it with pleasure. It's very difficult, I think, for GUNI and ACUP, this kind of mixing people that come from around the world, so from India, from Egypt, from Africa, from America, North America, Latin America, from Europe, so it's not an easy issue. We have, all of us, a lot of things in our lives, so it's like having the time to think and try to make this kind of collaboration. It's a great to see that it's going on, and seeing this space so full make us think. We were talking about that before. It's like that something's going on, so it's like a good indication that we are on the right path, and it's going to have sense and long-term running history of the group. So yesterday we had this kind of a lot of papers, but we think that some of them we said these are not for this occasion, for the next Congress, because it's speculating. It's like thinking. It's like we could. It's not, again, time for doing that. It's like time for action. So, but there was some kind of lacking of. So SDGs give you a lot of things to do, but I think that we were missing, for instance, gender approach or human rights approach. So I think that should be there. That should be we should make the focus on that, because university has things to do and to say on that. We cannot accept SDG washing. So it's like the greenwashing. So now it's becoming a trend, that SDG washing. So we are not accepting that, so we think that we should be very, very, very strong on that. It's not a cosmetic thing. It's like something that has to transform really the universities. So universities have to open to society in a more broad way, more clearly. And I think that why the more powerful voice against climate change is 16 years old girl. It's like there's a lot of people have been talking about, and why we are now hearing her, and all that's been done in universities for many, many years is not been used and really helped the world to go better. So unfortunately, I think that we are in a system failure in a way, so in many ways. But it also is a way of opportunity to rethink, but also to act differently. So yesterday, 2 days ago, I was in Dublin to attend the platform Frontline Defenders, that were 150 human rights defenders were get together just to talk about their problems, about the issues they are trying to tackle, the inequalities and the problems they face on their territories, on environmental issues. So they put their lives in risk for that. And I think that they feel very alone. They are really alone. There's nobody there. It's like them and their communities. So should the university, I think that university, they were asking for that also. There was one of the panels were saying we need research dedicated to make documentation about the problems, try to see who's doing what, and just making that known to everybody. So I think that we are in a moment that human rights are in disease. So with powerful governments are using the law in some kind of strange ways. So it's time to stand up and try to fight really this backwards of the human rights. So also the university, I think, that has a key role on that. Many of the faculties have this kind of siloed work, and I think it's more and more important to make this kind of transversal view, what's going on, so the professionals should think first on people, not on their own professional career, but what am I gonna do for the world? So for instance, when we talk about these the predator companies that are killing a lot of environments, what kind of economy are students learning? So in the high education, so it's like something should be changed there also. The university should be also a place where to open to other realities. So maybe this kind of human rights defenders, they probably didn't study. A lot of them, they didn't had higher education, but they are very powerful and they have knowledge, a very powerful knowledge and values that I think that should be more in the system. So we have to teach for creating people who can resolve the problems, and that has this kind of interdisciplinary mind in the center. We cannot go on the silos. Just want to remember something that said Michelle Bachelet at the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Dublin this week. It's like, I like it because it puts you in a good place. She said something like, I am tactically pessimistic, but strategically optimistic. So things are not so well, but it's gonna be better. So we work for that strategical good future. And we, from our part in the cooperation department, we are working on that. For instance, next week we are presenting a grants line for that's called INCO. Javier is here and just is involved in that, and also to create this kind of synergies between NGOs and universities for projects in common, to go to Europe and get some funds from the Horizon 2020. So we are trying really hard to make this kind of connections. And also very soon, in a few weeks, let's hope, there's going to be a working group between the universities, just to mix this kind of cooperation, universities and research, just to start this conversation, to make it really, really much more powerful. Because we have started this process of the new cooperation plan for the next 4 years, and we think that this is one of our priorities in our work. And I leave it here. I'm sorry because I've been a little bit random, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Itaf Ben Abdallah and Karma Gwal. Bon dia a totes i a tots i benvinguts a aquest acte. Intentaré ser molt breu perquè el que també jo crec que ens interessa és escoltar el debat amb el grup d'experts i les seves presentacions. En tot cas, com sabeu, la GUNI, la Global University Network for Innovation, is fully committed with the Agenda 2030, as you know, on the last years. We are promoting the analysis and debate about the role of higher education and research on the SDGs and on the Agenda 2030. And because of that, as you know, as you maybe know, we are organizing mainly three, let's say, areas of work. The first one is the international conference, just Karma just mentioned a moment ago. And it's going to be, as you know, the second international conference on SDGs and higher education. It's going to be here in Barcelona on next March 2020. And we are really happy because as Karma just mentioned before, we received almost 180 proposals just for 1 day and a half. So that's almost impossible. So you were working so hard. Thank you very much for work for this. It's going to be difficult to decide which, let's say, 30, 40 of them will be presented in the conference. But it's really interesting to see that the sector is very, let's say, working hard on that. There is plenty of ideas, of proposals, universities doing reflection, doing action as we are proposing from GUNI. The second activity, as you know, is the group of experts on higher education and SDGs. So I would like to thank again your work during this last year and mainly this second publication about the implementation of SDGs in higher education. And the last one is I would say, projects, different projects. For instance, as a group and GUNI, we are involved in a very interesting project on climate change and co-creation within different regions of Europe. As you know, the focus on this, let's say this and the next year on this SDGs and higher education world are focusing very much on implementation. As the previous speaker said, we want to stress the importance of, let's say, take action on research, take action on higher education, take action institutionally on the favor of SDGs on the agenda. And because, as you know, we are in the 4th anniversary of the declaration, and we see that something is still lack, and we need much more emphasis on implementing. And I fully agree with Karma when he's saying maybe these 180 proposals were not stressing so much about things like human rights, about gender equality, on things like that. And as you maybe know, in the next, if I remember well, the 10th of December, we are presenting the new GUNI World Report, which is focusing on the role of humanities in higher education and the interrelation between humanities, science, and technology. So we were talking before with her about this strategic role of universities, also on the, let's say, humanities world, also on the world of human rights, justice, peace, and gender, and so on. So maybe we have to move a little further our institutions to talk about and to analysis and to talk about more about these issues. And because of that, we decided at GUNI to promote this analysis on the role and the future of humanities in this new world. Just to finish, només per acabar, alguns agraïments. Thank you very much to the Union for Mediterranean for your help. Thank you very much again to the group of experts. Thank you so much for being here with us in Barcelona. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Moltes gràcies a la Generalitat de Catalunya, per descomptat, especialment a l'Agència Catalana de Cooperació al Desenvolupament. I finalment, si em perdoneu també, un agraïment a tot l'equip de la CUP i de GUNI, que, com bé deia la Carme, som un petit equip però molt compromès, molt professional i amb moltes ganes d'empènyer moltes coses. Gràcies. So now we change to the second table. So please, Professor Rajesh Tandon from the UNESCO co-chair in community-based research. Please, Professor Rajesh, if you can come here to the table. He's gonna make a conference called Disciplines, Professions, and Sustainable Development Goals, Challenges in Higher Education in India. Thank you very much, Professor Tandon, for being with us. It's a pleasure. Yeah, sure. Do you want to sit here?
No, you sit.
Yeah. I sit there.
Or maybe you can. You can come here. Come here. You can come here. Yeah, because you can see the people. There's a screen which hides you. Good morning. We missed you yesterday. It's called absent. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I was noticing. Good morning. Buenos días, more or less. My Catalan language expertise is rather weak. It is improving year by year. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of the work that we as a group of experts in GUNI have been doing around role of higher education, SDGs. I first of all want to alert you to the fact that 2 days ago, on October 2, 2019, we celebrated 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And 3 weeks ago in New Delhi, we had hosted a international dialogue on relevance of Gandhi to higher education today. That report is available with GUNI and GUNI colleagues, and those of you who are interested can access it from our website. And I want to therefore start by acknowledging that in today's world, Gandhi's relevance has increased. His position on truth in today's era of post-truth, and his position on non-violence as a means to achieve that truth in an era of growing violence, not just in terms of war, but in the families and the communities in everyday life, far more. Gandhi also talked about what is the role of universities. And many people do not know, but he was instrumental in setting up 2 universities in India, though most of his work is known in the field of primary education, because he started schools in South Africa and in India. In his own way, he said that we need engineers and we need scientists, but their expertise should be meant for the service of society. And that pretty much sums up what the role of higher education in implementation of sustainable development goals ought to be as we move forward. My contribution in GUNI's this very powerful report, which all of you will receive a copy of afterwards. along with my colleague Pooja, who's not here, is focusing on a theme that I picked up from the studies we have been doing in India. And it's a theme on disciplines, professions, and SDGs. Some of that reference has been made by you already. So let me explain to you or share with you where I'm coming from. Do you see this? Well, I can't see. You can move one slide. You can. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks, Joseph. Yeah, fine. Oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah. I want to make three foundational principles to begin the presentation. In my view, sustainable development goals and issues related to climate change are most important public goods of our time. Global public goods, but also having local relevance. The foundational principle is that higher education is a public good, despite what the World Bank has been saying for the last 25 years. Yes, we all improve our livelihood by going to university, but those who have completed universities education and who continue to do research are also responsible leaders of our societies. And therefore, the purpose of higher education is not, as it is being pronounced these days, how much money the graduates make as the ranking criteria, but a public good. We believe that higher education institutions are socially responsible when they support public goods. And as I mentioned, today's public goods, local and global, are SDGs and climate. And this higher education institutions can do by doing differently what they are supposed to do. They are supposed to do teaching and research, and they can do it in the service of the new public goods that we are talking about. They don't have to do anything different. They don't have to go out and clean the streets. That's not their job. Though these days, social responsibility of higher education is seen on weekends planting trees. But that's not the purpose. Teach what you teach differently and do research what you do research on differently in respect of the new public goods. Let me see if this. Okay. Oh. No, this I left the rest of it. I can do that. And if you see the same slide again, raise your hand. Now let me give you three very quick examples from the Indian context about teaching SDGs. Forestry and agriculture teaching in our country. Forestry teaching changed during the colonial period because we imbibed the British system of forestry, not the system of forestry practiced by our indigenous communities over centuries. And the British system of forestry was designed to extract forest resources for private benefit, not to live with forests as indigenous people do. And agriculture transformed significantly in our region, teaching of agriculture in 1962, 61, 62, with the advent of the famous Green Revolution, where we pumped pesticide and chemicals all over the soil, water, trees, plants, and all the products. Now, the world is chasing our farmers. Indian government now wants India to become organic. Before 1961, all agriculture was organic. We made it inorganic, now we want them to be organic. Now, do agricultural universities in India now teach different agriculture, or they are still teaching inorganic agriculture? New pedagogy for engaged learning, water harvesting. We are running out of water in our country. Several of our cities have become dry, and when it rains, they are all flooded for weeks. It's all part of the climate change. Historically, different regions of our country, we have the Himalayas, we have the desert, and we have the peninsula with a very large coast on all sides. Well, different ecological regions had different indigenous practices of water harvesting. Of course, the hydrology department and curriculum ignored all that because it was considered voodoo science. If it is not proven in the lab, it doesn't exist. 2 weeks ago, our Prime Minister makes an appeal. Please, can we identify indigenous water harvesting practices? We are running out of water. But the curriculum, even today, hasn't changed. The third example is about a profession which, my first degree is engineering, electronics, not civil. But civil engineering departments around the country are teaching construction design and use of construction materials which are responsible for destruction of environment. They haven't changed as yet. So teaching SDGs will require changing the content of the curriculum as well as the pedagogy, how you teach it. Then let me give you some examples of the new knowledge for SDGs. As was mentioned earlier yesterday, we struggled as a group to identify submissions out of these 180 submissions. Which ones were actually focusing on research on implementation of SDGs? Very few. Very few. Most of them were focused on how we can study SDGs. But we are interested in implementation research because that also requires. And several of you may know that Guni's sixth higher education report, which was released a year and a half ago, talked about social responsibility of universities balancing the local and the global. And if there is one area where this balance is required, it is in respect of SDGs. Maternal health solutions in Eastern India, in Nigeria, and in Catalan will not be the same, though maternal health problems need to be addressed if SDG number 3 has to be achieved. So local solutions can only come when local knowledge is produced. And this is where universities can play an important role, provided they learn how to do research in partnership with others and how they include multiple perspectives. I gave you the example of water harvesting. The expert on indigenous systems of water harvesting today is at least 65-year-old because rest of them died. How do we respect other forms of knowledge? If we want to understand organic farming, maybe we need to respect how use of local manure and local seeds was being done and still carried out by those whose knowledge we have discarded or devalued. And most importantly, research needs to be carried out which links the gap between knowing and acting. There's too much knowledge produced in books, journal articles, and conferences attended by like-minded people as an inward-looking club. There is very little use of knowledge, linking production of knowledge to action agenda locally at the district and below level. Research needs to align itself in that direction. So the paper talks about disciplines, professions, and SDGs. In this background, disciplines are chemistry, physics, sociology, anthropology. As has been said, we all recognize each SDG requires transdisciplinary understanding. the problem of water is not just hydrology studies, and the problem of maternal health is not just in medical school. A phrase called transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary has been in vocabulary for 40 years. I've been hearing it. In practice in universities that I know, not yet, not yet. Disciplinary curriculum boundaries are very tightly defined. If a new department comes up, we have a case in an indigenous location in India, in eastern region. A new university came up 3 years ago. The department wanted to produce a curriculum in social sciences which respected the local indigenous environment. But it was just not approved. Why? Because the national social science curriculum body comprises of people who read Talcott Parsons. And it doesn't matter whether you are teaching social sciences in indigenous communities, that disciplinary rigidity exists. So it is not really change at the institutional level or at the level of teaching in one particular university. It is the disciplinary gatekeepers who need to be sensitized, pushed, nudged, confronted. And then we all have these disciplinary bound structures in our universities. We have departments, we have faculties, and we have centers. And each of them fixes the curriculum and the domain. Now that needs to be changed if curriculum has to change in light of SDGs, in light of climate issues. Then of course, I have already given you some examples of professions, but professional associations exist perhaps everywhere, Catalan Association of Engineers or architects or planners or lawyers or whatever, doctors, they are in all our countries, regional, national. And these professions have been inward looking. Nobody has asked them to be accountable publicly as yet. We need to have a debate with professions like engineering and architecture in our context. Say, what are you doing to train next generation of professionals who are sensitive to climate issues? No, not yet happened in our region. Leadership in these professions, professional associations, is what I am calling mostly aging, and if I may add, male aging even. So, if I am head of the National Association of Engineers in India, I must be at least 75-year-old, which means I studied engineering around 1950. And this applies across all professions. They should be concerned what kind of professionals are coming out of universities and colleges in future. If they are not sensitive to and they are not learning what they need to learn for SDGs and climate issues. And if SDG agenda is multidisciplinary, professions need to have a conversation across professions. But each professional association operates in silo. So the National Association of Engineers has never talked to or met anybody from National Association of Architects. And if architects and engineers don't change, then there's no hope for the design of construction and construction materials to change. So what can be done? Let me give you a few examples from India later, but let me just mention what I think needs to be done, and the paper argues this a little bit more. We need advocacy to link our national higher education policy to SDGs. Announcements about national higher education policies happen periodically. There are ministers and secretaries, and every country has a structure. they need to say something about contribution of higher education to SDGs, because policies act as signals and as potential use of future resources. We need to incentivize societally engaged teaching. Every time I speak to teachers in India and at some other countries, they say we do societally engaged teaching, but that is not incentivized. Classroom teaching is incentivized, classroom examination is incentivized. So I attended a conference of vice chancellors and I asked them to raise hand if they knew how many SDGs existed. Only a few hands came up, and even one of them said 15. I think we need to talk to vice chancellors. They need to stand up and say, we are committed to make universities contribute to sustainable development goals. Because that again is a signal to the rest of the institution. And if necessary, let us educate our vice chancellors, rectors or vice rectors or whatever the name is, institutional leadership. I think interprofessional dialogue should be organized. I think institution like GUNI, I am trying to now get in India various professional associations to come together and have a dialogue on what do they want to do about climate and SDGs. Because if they talk to each other, they may actually support the preparation of future professionals. Because all those who are coming out of engineering colleges, medical schools, law degree, architecture, planning, management, economics, if they don't study different things and understand these issues, they will continue to behave like their predecessors. And Greta's of this world will become younger and younger. The next girl who speaks out may be 10-year-old, and the last one may be 1-year-old. And I think there is a need to promote learning of and incentivizing community-linked research methodology, partnership research methodology, where local SDG questions are addressed. Let me quickly just give you some examples of what is happening. This is an example. GUNI's initiative is an excellent example of focusing on higher education SDGs. There are other networks, some of you are familiar with. International Association of Universities has a particular stream of work on this, the Commonwealth Association of Universities, and there are several national associations. I have successfully persuaded Association of Indian Universities, which by the way is one of the oldest associations, 96-year-old association. Association of Indian Universities to put SDGs in their next Vice Chancellor's Conference. At least sensitize them, raise the question. In India, we have recently created a policy. The University Grants Commission approved a policy called Fostering Social Responsibility of Higher Education. And in that, there are 2 items, one of which is linking to SDGs. And so now the policy is in place a couple of months ago. Now they will start putting some money behind the policy. And as these grants commission do, some money and muscle. Sometimes you have to say carrot and stick kind of thing. I think we need to mobilize associations of teachers, professionals and students. Yesterday we heard there was a case study which hopefully will be presented in the conference on a National Association of Students being mobilized on SDGs. I think students can be champions for also reform in universities. I think UNESCO's regional and national offices, country offices should more actively talk about SDGs and its link to higher education. It is not happening. In each national office, the country representative preference, art, culture, heritage, primary education. Lots of things are important. But if once in a quarter they talk about SDGs and higher education, I think it will signal a better link. And in that context, we should, in preparation for the next UNESCO conference on higher education, whenever and wherever it is held, we should signal for a conversation on higher education and their contribution to SDGs in all our regions, not just in Paris or Barcelona. Finally, having spent a lot of my time in hanging around civil society organizations nationally and internationally, I must say I am a bit frustrated that their demand on higher education is still muted. I am trying to persuade them to focus attention on their own children. Most of the civil society leaders have children who are graduating or have graduated, like mine. But what our kids have studied is not of concern to us. Why? So as a result, civil society has not yet made sufficient demand on higher education institutions to be relevant to SDGs and climate issues. And I do hope that in our collective effort forward, in your example of partnerships, this could be done. We are, as UNESCO chair, have worked on a global consortium called Knowledge for Change. Knowledge for Change consortium now has 13 hubs in 10 countries. Each hub is a partnership between a university and a civil society organization. And the purpose of the hub is to train next generation of researchers, from students and practitioners, to do research on a locally prioritized SDG. This is serving two agendas. It is bringing the world of practice and the world of academia together, and it is linking research to solutions for SDGs locally. And I'd be happy to have one of those hubs emerge in Catalan as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajesh Tandon, for your always interesting reflections and thoughts. We still have 5 minutes if anybody wants to make a specific question, a comment on Rajesh Tandon's ideas. Anybody wants to make a comment, a question? Could be also in Spanish, Catalan. Yes, please, Thomas, please.
Jorgensen from the European University Association. Just a small addition. You said participatory research for the linked in the communities, community-based participatory research. I like that. But it should also be teaching, no? It's not only, and this is, I say this because we see it in Europe, that the, participatory problem-based learning, this whole movement that's coming up, actually does what you say, but instead of the research, what we often see is the teaching side that's driving this. Right? It's also the students that say, this is what we want. We want to make a difference, not just be passive recipients.
No, yeah. You're right. Thank you for pointing that out, because teaching has to move outside the classroom, and it has to become community engaged teaching and learning, because then students become actors of change right there. So you're right.
Please.
Hello, my name is Delia Mera. I'm coming from University Pompeu Fabra. So I was just reflecting a bit on what you said, and I agree that the engagement is the problem. So even when the students are asking you to move curriculum towards more sustainable topics, then it's difficult to do so. And specifically in Europe, I wanted to comment, I don't know how it is in India, but once you start engaging with the policymakers at the level of university, there's always this fear of how to reform the curricula, because there are all these European credits and credit points and the system that is pretty rigid and stiff in their ways. How to start reforming the curricula under the system that exists and appoint the appropriate points and follow the agenda that has been set, I don't know, 50 years ago. And the second thing I wanted to say is we have specific problems in the field from which I am, so law in general, but I'm also a corporate lawyer, so you can imagine what I'm doing. There's even more resistance from that side and even more embeddedness in a framework that already exists. So my question would be how to start tackle those issues, because kind of going from preaching to practice is not that difficult in terms of the student engagement and forming the curricula. More the problem stems from the approving those curricula at the higher level. So even if it passes at the university level, what is it then at the European level or at the national level? What are the policies of education? So those things I think that I'm missing a bit being addressed also in public. Thank you.
Well, Thomas is here and he will answer some of these questions on European level. But it is a situation which is not unique to you. It is a difficult situation. The system of approval inside each university itself is highly bureaucratic. I have learned that it takes 3 to 4 years to approve a new course. So, and then curriculum at national level is even more problematic. But I think that we, in our different ways, if we continue to focus attention on this, sensitize those who are higher up to pay attention to this. Otherwise, one more generation of students will graduate with the old knowledge, which is not relevant to the contemporary challenges we face. And I think this manner in which curriculum is approved and it needs to be also in some way questioned and resolved. But European level, I may not be able to answer. That's Thomas is going to speak later. I can offer some useful comments. Thank you. But it's a real problem. I agree.
Molt bé, moltes gràcies. Thank you so much, Rajesh, again for your inspiring words and analysis. So we come to the next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So passem a la següent sessió. Disculpeu que estic canviant idioma contínuament. Passem a la següent sessió amb la vicerectora de la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, Pastora Martínez, que ens parlarà sobre Cases of Higher Education Institutions, the example of the Catalan University System. Moltes gràcies, Pastora, per ser aquí amb nosaltres avui. I a partir d'ara donem relleu en la relatoria i Arnau Caral, el director del Consell Assessor pel Desenvolupament Sostenible de la Generalitat, farà la moderació des d'ara fins al final de la sessió. Gràcies, Arnau. Sí.
Okay. Hello, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf both of the Advisory Council for the Sustainable Development of Catalonia and also the European Network of Advisory Councils on Sustainable Development and the Environment. You know that one of the most important things today is that no one has said that SDGs are important, because in many high level, it's not a joke. In many meetings or high level panels where we are attending, we always, after two or 3 hours of discussion, the main conclusion is that SDGs are fantastic, are important, and we need to solve some transversal challenges. And look, come on, we know it. So let's skip this slide and let's go directly to practical things. In Catalonia, the Catalan government has just approved the national plan for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and during the process of preparing this interdepartmental plan, we had the chance to meet some interesting people and institutions that gave some hope in order that something is moving in terms of SDGs. And one of these institutions is the University Council of Catalonia, that created 1 year ago, less than 1 year ago, before summer, this University Council of Catalonia created a working group, a specific working group, with all universities in Catalonia in order to work on the implementation of the SDGs in the universities. Let's say in another word, how, in order to transform, this working group tries to transform universities, not to implement the 2030 agenda, but to change, to transform the universities using SDGs. And so this is, I'm really pleased to introduce you the Pastora Martinez, the chair of this working group, and also deputy chair of the Open University of Catalonia. So, Pastora, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Arnau, for this presentation, and thank you for being here today with us. Many of the colleagues of this working group on 2030 agenda are here today with us, so thank you as well for coming. Thanks to the GUNI Network for inviting us. So I would take this opportunity for presenting you the work we've been doing at the Catalan university system, and also the work we have just started doing within this specific working group. And today's debate, I think, is substantial because we are focusing on the different challenges we as higher education institutions we are facing concerning the implementation of the 2030 agenda. And we've just seen some of the challenges in India, but most of them are common for all of us as higher education institutions. And those challenges, in fact, are very, very important, but I wanted to focus and not forget the main challenge, if it works, we still have, which is actually achieving the SDGs. Because despite all the efforts that have been done, we are not on track for achieving most of the targets established by the 2030 agenda. And it is not just that there's a limited success in progress towards the SDGs, but also that the trends right now along several dimensions of the 2030 agenda confirm that they are not even moving, we are not even moving in the right direction. So much more has to be done in order to change the things for achieving the SDGs. And this is something that I don't know whether you can read it or not, but I will send you the link for this report. But this is something that can be seen in that table. That shows the projected distance from reaching the SDGs by 2030. Okay, so this table was elaborated taking into account several existing assessments as also the current rates of progress of them. And what it shows is that only very few targets, those in green, should be attainable by 2030. And those are important targets because they include child mortality or full enrollment in primary school, which are very important, but just very few. The second column, there's another set of goals that may also be reached, but increasing the effort we are doing right now, and such as eradicating extreme poverty or enhancing scientific research. But then there's a second group, the two last columns, of targets where the trends progress are too slow to meet the targets. And this, the third column, happens with maternal mortality, child malnutrition, or access to safe drinking. But the most disturbing column is the last one, the one in orange, because here there are some targets for which recent trends said that we are not even moving in the right direction. So we have very negative impacts. And in particular, 4 targets fall into that category, which are very important, which are raising inequalities, climate change, biodiversity loss, and increasing waste from human activity. This table was included in this report, The Future is Now, Science for Sustainable Development, which was published a few weeks ago. And this report is very interesting because it's a sort of assessment produced by an independent group of scientists appointed by the UN. And what it seeks basically is to improve the science and policy interface as an evidence-based instrument to support policymakers, not just scientists, not just leaders of higher education institutions, but policymakers and other stakeholders in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. And here, the report stresses the importance of science and technology for achieving the SDGs. I'm afraid you can't read this one neither, but still. So what this report says is that for the needed transformation to be made, instead of tracking all the SDGs separately, what they propose is they identify what they call entry points, 6 entry points, that offer what they say is the most promise for achieving the desired transformations at the necessary scale and speed. And as you can see, those entry points are not just single SDGs or single targets, but are a sort of combination of many of them. So the human well-being and capabilities, sustainable and just economy, for instance. No? So those entry points remember me a bit the missions that the new Horizon Europe has defined for tracking the SDGs. And in order to address this entry point, as they call them, they also the report also identifies 4 levels, which are the roles. And between those 4 levels, we have governance, financing, individual and collective action, and science and technology. No? What they say is that it is only through the combination of these 4 levels, not just one level separately, that it will be possible to do these transformations and thus to achieve the SDGs. And what it is also very important is that the report also includes a call to action for the different stakeholders, included higher education institutions. And going to the higher education institutions and the change we should do in order to advance in the achievement of the SDGs, you can find the following, many of them already mentioned by Professor Tandon. So you can see that what they highlight is, first, transforming science institutions, and here they're talking about larger collective projects, holistic programs, gender equality, transdisciplinarity, long-term research partnerships, also capabilities and skills for researchers and the staffs at universities, evaluation criteria, other evaluation criteria, and funding initiatives. They also talk about mobilizing the existing knowledge, and here at the Catalan level, we're discussing a lot about open access of research results. So here is specifically pointed. They stress a 3rd line of action, which is education for sustainable development, with new concepts and competencies, also these institutional change and again, partnerships, which are very important. These new partnerships, or forging new partnerships, is very important here. We all know it, but they talk about to create a sort of science policy society knowledge hubs, whatever that means. Boosting the capacity in the global south, which is also very important, and it is also related with the open access of the research results. And last but not least, advancing in research in society. And here they talk about including non-academic knowledge and other societal actors within the debate and within the transformation. So basically what they say is that achieving the agenda cannot left to chance, so required transformation should be deliberate. And what they propose basically are radical change at the global academic system level. So it is crucial to act as a system, to act as a community, as a whole community. Because it is not just important to change every university, but it's also important here to change our funders, our regulators, I mean, all the system that is acting at the academic level. So that's why at the Catalan university system level, we decided to take action as a system, as a community, and to create this working group with all the different stakeholders, because, as I said, many of the challenges we are tracking can only be addressed as that. So let me, before going on, most of you are Catalan, but as I have the opportunity to share this with you, just to give you a few figures about the university system in Catalonia. So, so Catalonia is a region of 32,000 square kilometers, and we are 7.5 million people, and our GDP in 2017 was more than 230 million euros. Concerning the Catalan knowledge system, it is made of 12 universities, more than 60 research centers, many infrastructures, technology centers, research support facilities, more than 30 science and technology parks, and more than 600,000 companies. Concerning our students, the volume of the students in tertiary education, there are more than 330,000 people. And when we are focusing on this University Council of Catalonia, which in fact is the Consell Interuniversitari de Catalunya, because the translation in English may be a bit awkward. So this University Council of Catalonia is the coordinating body where all the 12 universities are there, but also the other stakeholders, including the Catalan government. Also the agencies and the regulatory agencies. Okay, so, sorry. No. What have we done so far? No? So, although this is not part of an exclusively work from the Catalan university system, I think it is important to mention here that in 2016, so just 1 year after the approval of the SDGs, here in Catalonia and led by Arnau Queralt and the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development of Catalonia, right? Yeah, the CATS. This report was elaborated, and the report identified the main challenges by SDG that needed to be tackled in order to achieve or implement the 2030 agenda in Catalonia. For instance, concerning the higher education institutions, the report established that a specific target to tackle the equitative access of tertiary education should be to ensure the universal completion of upper secondary education. Concerning Catalan universities and within the framework of the ACUP, which is the Association of the Catalan Public Universities, in 2017 we started to make some a series of actions in order to tackle the SDGs, and we started first with the aim of creating a sort of mapping of the best practices we were performing at the Catalan public universities, and we launched a website which is the ods.cat, sdg.cat, that collects the different initiatives that were performed at the 8 universities at the ACUP. The second initiative was already mentioned by Josep Maria Vilalta, which was this international conference on SDGs organized by the GUNI network. And yeah, just to remember that the second edition will be next March here in Barcelona. And also in 2017, what we did is the commitment that we should do, as Catalan universities. And we approved this commitment of the Catalan public universities to the SDGs, and we focus in 3 actions: global and responsible citizenship education, community engagement, and new partnerships. But we started to move as well at the Spanish level, and within the Spanish Conference of Rectors, we also approved last year a commitment of the Spanish universities, the Catalan ones included, with the commitment with the SDGs. And this commitment includes now a whole institutional approach related to the 2030 agenda, including all the academic activities, I mean, teaching, research, innovation, and also campus initiatives. It is worth to mention that this commitment was included by the Spanish government in the Spanish action plan for the implementation of the 2030 agenda that was presented last year in the high-level political forum in New York. So it was a good recognition of the work we've been doing as a universities, as a system. But okay, so the commitments are done, and they're important. We should start by the commitments, but they're not enough. So let me give you two examples of very good examples of what can be done as a system with a partnership action here. And let me present this global framework for the inclusion of the gender equality perspective in the higher education teaching. And this is a framework published by our Catalan Agency for the Assurance of the Quality of the Higher Education. And the document was elaborated with the Women and Science Committee of the University Council of Catalonia. And basically, what it gives us is some guidelines and recommendations in order to include this gender equality perspective in all the areas, the different areas of higher education teaching. It also stressed that gender equality is a fundamental aspect of the quality of the teaching and the education. And what it provides is basically a regulatory framework and conceptual framework, and also some tools and indicators in order to move forward on that. This was last year, and this year all the universities are just implementing these guidelines within our education activities. The other example I wanted to give you, it was more a campus initiative, and is related with the SDG 7, which is clean energy. And it's an example that had a big impact, and it was this collaborative purchase of energy coordinated by the Catalan Consortium of Academic System Services, the CESUC. And thanks to this joint action, for the first time last year, all the Catalan universities, but also Catalan research centers, Catalan scientific and technology parks, are using 100% renewable energy. So after all this work done in these 2 years and a half, what we decided, as already mentioned, is to create this 2030 Agenda Working Group at the University Council of Catalonia in order to define a common strategy to implement and accelerate this implementation of the 2030 Agenda within the Catalan university system. And we have one representative of each university, also the Catalan government, and also the different agencies that are part of the system. So where are we now? We decided to start with a diagnosis in order to know where were we as the Catalan system concerning the 2030 agenda. And we decided also to join action with the EAU that already performed a survey 4 years ago at an international level. We asked them to join forces, and we made the same survey as the EAU at the Catalan level this year, 2009. So basically, the results of this survey I'm going to show you are for the 12 Catalan universities. And what is important to mention is that this survey is a sort of top-down approach, but because it was answered by leaders at the institutions, so not by other staff at the universities, not by students. So what we can see here is that at least 2030 agenda and the SDGs are already well known among the 12 Catalan universities, or at least among the leaders of the Catalan universities. When we asked who's involved in engaging in sustainable development, I think that those figures are really optimistic, but what you can see is that more than 50% of students are engaged in sustainable development, and if you can see, the staff and the leaders institutions are more than 80%. Another interesting point in this survey is that they also ask for the different activities of the university by SDGs. What was the level of work? So good established work is the full bars, and an emerging work is in the dot bars. So as you can see, and these are the 16 SDGs, so what you can see is that all the SDGs, at least, are covered in the education and training activities, and also in the research. So in both cases, the SDGs where we are doing more work is the 3, health and well-being, 4, quality education, and 5, gender equality. When talking about community engagement, also many of the work is done in those 3 SDGs, but also reduced inequalities, SDG 5. And finally, with the campus initiatives, also here you can see the responsible consumption and production also very high. The last interesting point I wanted to mention of this survey is that we also were asked about the difficulties that has the institution in order to work on sustainable development. And basically, there are 3: lack of funding, lack of staff, and lack of knowledge. These are the main ones we consider. The other question was, what do you think is more needed in order to promote this implementation of the 2030 agenda within the universities? And what we said was, 1, institutional commitment, we should start on that. 2 is the engagement of the higher education community. 3 is the funding. 4, transdisciplinarity. And 5, an action plan. So this is what we are now, and what are the next steps. So the next step should be addressing these specific challenges we have as a system. For the lack of knowledge, we should work on raising the awareness. For the lack of staff, in capabilities and skills. And for the lack of funding, try to find or push forward to have specific funding initiatives. As a group, we are moving forward, and for each committee of the University Council of Catalonia, we will define a set of actions that should be performed. So for the teaching committee, they should organize and decide by themselves what would be the actions to be done for the research committee, and so and so. And with all this information, what we will do is to elaborate this strategic plan for the promotion of the 2030 agenda at the University Council of Catalonia. So let me just finish summarizing all my talk and taking an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. Moltes gràcies. Moltes gràcies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pastor and Judith. I mean, the explanation was excellent, but then I have no problem with the time. So perfect. So this is an important point. We have still time for 1 or 2 questions. I really suggest. I don't know if you knew, what the council is doing, but it's excellent.
Thank you, Arnau. So it's the first public presentation we are doing about the work of this working group that was created in May this year. So we've just started moving and coordinating the whole thing. So it's
No, I know.
probably you didn't know it because it's the
Yeah, but the
first.
point is that, I mean, those people working on the 2030 agenda and the transformation that it implies, we all know the difficulties and that we are just trying to move very old-fashioned organizations, let's say this. And I mean, it's not easy to transform these institutions, universities, governments, public administration, but also firms. So you are starting a fantastic path to the future.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lila Melon from the Pompeu Fabra University. So I have been researching in the framework of my project also the green procurement at the level of Catalonia, trying to present it as best practice also at the EU level and as a policy recommendation. And when I started to deal with that, I was also starting to deal with universities, of course, in the procurement. So when you mentioned the 100% renewable energy, I went through some paperwork, I went through the whole process, how it went. But what I didn't find, and maybe if you know, I just want to take the opportunity, is how do we know that what we're sourcing is really renewable? So the problem of green energy being labeled as green, not being green at the end. So we had several examples at the EU level when that was happening in consecutive cases, that what companies are selling as green is not green. Okay. Do we have any system in place? Because I didn't find any.
So I'm afraid I don't have the details on that, but I will look for them because I have no answer.
I can send you an email. It was just a question if you're aware of any kind of system that verifies at the end that the green is really green. Just that.
No, sorry.
No?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other question? If not, I have a comment. I mean, I was quite shocked when I saw that one of the main challenges, one of the main difficulties coming from universities was knowledge, lack of knowledge. Where you should express like this. It's quite shocking because some society considers you as a source of knowledge, and but perhaps it's the way.
No, I think most of us interpret the questions instead of knowledge, talking about awareness.
Okay.
So I think the lack of awareness is the point that we mention most of us.
Okay.
Not the lack of knowledge. I mean, we do know that we lack some knowledge for some for addressing some specific SDGs or some specific questions, but there's already a lot of existing knowledge that could be mobilized for that. So it's a balance between both.
How do you mobilize that all existing knowledge and you make it?
Yeah, that's why for me it's so important this relation between the science and the policy, because we cannot expect that higher education institutions and research centers could do everything. Politics as well. So the point here is how to balance and to force politicians in order to make the good decisions and the good public policies in order to change and tackle the SDGs.
That's, I fully agree, and please make sure that you're going to be part, that we are just building an alliance for 2030 agenda in Catalonia with civil society, the government, and one of the actors that has been already implied involved in the project or in the construction of this alliance is the University Council of Catalonia. So we need you need us. So yes, let's work together.
Sure. And
finally, I would like to thank you for showing the report, the future is now, which was launched on the 11th of September in New York. Pastor recommended it to you, and I would like also to suggest. There is another question here.
You mentioned staff, the staff issue, capacity building for staff, one of the solutions. What ideas do you have for the training? What kind of programs are you thinking about? How are you going to, if you can just share some of the ideas?
There are some initiatives already going on at the different Spanish universities. For instance, the universities, the Valencian universities, Valencia. So in the Valencian region, I don't know how to say it in English. Well, in Valencia, okay, these are 5 universities, public universities that created altogether a MOOC for the awareness, sensibilization of the SDGs, and they strongly recommended to all their staff to follow that move. This is one initiative, but we are also discussing how to do it at the systemic level in order to improve these skills and capabilities among our staff. We don't have at the Catalan level a global initiative in that sense, but each university is trying to move forward in that direction.
Yes. Any other common question? If not, Pastora. Oh, at the end. Sorry. The last one.
Gemma Rius from the Institute of Microelectronics of Barcelona. I belong to CSIC, and I miss that CSIC could maybe be part of this movement, at least at the Catalan level. So I guess.
Yeah, we in fact we started with the University Council of Catalonia, which CSIC doesn't form part, but I think that as many partners here pushing forward this implementation of the 2030 agenda is better. So maybe we can think about some collaboration with CSIC for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so let's finish with this panel. So thank you, Pastora, for being here and for your explanation. And I would like to give a floor to 4 privileged speakers. So I am sorry for the pronunciation. Let's see. We have Gada Ahmadein, Orlando Sainz, Pesi Ogbuigwe, and Charles Richardson. Charles, you too. So. If you want to come here, please walk away. Perfect.
Okay. Oh, I will need to see.
Okay.
Maybe I should come here since I will be using that. Thank you.
Yes. You are ready? Are you ready? Well. I understand. Yes. Okay. It seems that we are ready for. Hello, people. Let's continue, please. Hello. Thank you. Let's continue with this open discussion. We're going to start with. We have Gada Ahmadein, Technical Coordinator of the Arab Network for Environment and Development, who will start. Then we can change. I don't know if we can follow the program. Or, okay. Then Orlando Saez, who is the coordinator of the Alliance of Ibero-American University Networks for Sustainability and Environment. Then we are going to move to Pesi Ogbuigwe, more or less. Council member of the Earth Charter and also advisor for the African region at the University Nations University Regional Center for Expertise. And finally, we are going to listen to Charles Richardson, Dean of the College of Business at the Misericordia University and member of the Board of Directors at the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Is it correct? You know, those people working on sustainable development have worked in institutions with very long names. This is the main conclusion of what we can say. So we are going to start with Gada. The idea is we are going to have 5 minutes for each one, and then we are going to open the floor to the audience, and then we can react. Yeah, do you agree with this point? So, Gara, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. My name is Gada Ahmadain. I'm representing the Arab Network for Environment and Development. And first of all, I would like to thank you all for being here and for thank the GUNI group of experts, which I'm really proud to be a member in, because we have this chance to exchange the knowledge, information, and experience from different regions. Well, my network is a little bit different from higher education and from the other expertise because we are an NGO network. We have more than 300 NGOs members from the Arab region, from North Africa and West Asia. And first of all, I would like to address Professor Rajesh because I would like to thank him so much for the presentation, and I don't want you to be so frustrated because maybe during my speech I will let you know some of the examples of how the civil society can partner with universities and make a change. Well, as you all know, we in the Arab region are facing a lot of challenges. You know, due to the political disturbances and conflicts, the scarcity of natural resources, water, energy, so on, which reflects on the food security, of course, and with the climate change impacts and a lot of internal displacements for local communities and so on. Also with the unsustainable production, consumption patterns, a lot of challenges. Of course, these challenges, they are reflecting on the development and sustainable development and the implementation of the SDGs in our countries. But despite those challenges, there are concrete steps taken now by the countries. And most of the countries now, they are having national strategies for sustainable development, which is a step forward, which includes, of course, the education sector and focusing on the education as well, because this is the main sector that is the driver of the implementation of the SDGs. So there are steps there. From our views that the civil society is a main actor among other other actors in the governments and in the countries that can make a change. But civil society, of course, should be considered by the countries and by the governments as main actors. This is as well as the universities, because universities, we know that we are seeing this in all of our countries, that universities, they have a role in the implementation of the SDGs through reviewing the strategies and plans and maybe proposing areas of change and putting recommendations for policies and different policies in different development sectors. So they have a huge role, but they are facing also a lot of challenges. The lack of resources, lack of capacities, even the campuses and buildings, they are not in a sustainable performance. The lack of vision, lack of restrictions, and maybe commitment. So there is a lot to do within the universities to take a step forward and to play a greater role in the implementation of the SDGs. Thank you.
So now, Orlando, the position about this question, which is general common for all, which are the main challenges to implement the SDGs in higher education in your specific context?
Buenos días. Disculpan, hablaré en castellano. Yo represento una alianza de redes iberoamericanas de universidades por la sustentabilidad del ambiente. Como su nombre lo indica, es una red de es una red de redes de universidades de Iberoamérica, implica redes de unos 15 países de América Latina y España. Desde un comienzo, que trabajamos en esta red desde el 2007, trabajamos muy de cerca con algunas universidades españolas. El trabajo nuestro, en general en América Latina, comienzo desde los años 70, 80, tenemos unos 40 años de trabajar en los temas de compromiso ambiental de las universidades. Ahora, desde el año 2016 comenzamos a plantear o asumir el reto que plantean los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, y lo que estamos viviendo en los últimos años es un cambio más que un cambio, una ampliación de nuestra perspectiva de trabajo. Las universidades siempre habíamos estado, en América Latina siempre habíamos estado, este grupo por lo menos estaba enfocado en los temas de ambiente, y evidentemente los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible amplían significativamente nuestro campo de trabajo, y ese es un reto enorme que estamos afrontando. Con base en la experiencia de más de 40 años que tenemos en la universidad, yo tengo trabajando en este tema desde comienzos de los años 90, así que casi 30 años de trabajo en este campo, intentando siempre hacerlo de la manera más reflexiva y consciente posible. Pues me permiten señalar como 2 o 3 temas relacionados con las presentaciones que se han hecho anteriormente. Creo que para la perspectiva mía es la que mencionaba de Bachelet, ¿sí? Yo siempre he sido optimista, pero en la práctica hay cosas en las que uno no puede serlo tanto. Hay cosas que efectivamente son negativas, y les señalaré básicamente 3 aspectos de lo, digamos, de lo peor a lo mejor que hemos estado logrando en estos últimos años. Desde los años 80 es claro en América Latina, y hubo una enorme cantidad de literatura que planteaba que enfrentar los temas ambientales que comenzaban en los años 70 y 80 exigía claramente una perspectiva interdisciplinaria y transdisciplinaria. Y eso se decía en todas partes, yo lo recuerdo claramente, que eso planteaba un reto enorme a las universidades para transformar su estructura académica, como lo señalaba Rajesh, rígidamente compartimentada, por disciplinas separadas. Y se dijo mucho, pero honestamente, después de 40 años, esto sigue igual o peor. Las universidades siguen absolutamente compartimentadas. Y yo ahí me he vuelto completamente pesimista, o sea, yo realmente veo muy poco que podamos transformar eso. No sé, será un reto para las próximas generaciones, pero yo ya estoy que entrego la toalla frente a ese reto. Nos ha ido bastante mejor en otro aspecto del reto de las universidades, que es el compromiso de los académicos, de los profesores de las universidades con los temas de ambiente y de sustentabilidad. Entonces, en eso sí ha habido en América Latina y en mi país, específicamente en Colombia, un avance significativo. O sea, cada vez hay un mayor número de profesores, académicos conscientes, interesados en estos temas, aunque sin duda ahí hay todavía muchísimo por hacer. Y un tercer tema que me parece que sí hemos avanzado bastante más, es en el del compromiso de las directivas universitarias, de los rectores, vicerrectores, de los niveles más altos de dirección de las universidades. En este tema, yo que he estado trabajando en el campo durante más de 30 años, lo he visto clarísimamente, en parte porque muchos colegas de mi generación han llegado a puestos directivos, o hemos llegado a puestos directivos, entonces pues hemos llegado a hacer lo que hace 25 o 30 años estábamos tratando de hacer. Es que cada vez hay más conciencia entre los directivos universitarios sobre estos temas, y eso se expresa tanto a nivel nacional en Colombia como en América Latina. Entonces, por ejemplo, en Colombia tenemos algo similar a la CRUE, la Asociación Colombiana de Universidades, y esa Asociación Colombiana de Universidades, son la gran mayoría de las instituciones de educación superior del país, está claramente comprometida, por lo menos desde el año 2018, con los temas de desarrollo sostenible. Y para terminar, simplemente en América Latina, igual sucedió. El año 2018 se realizó la Conferencia Regional de Educación Superior, y claramente uno de los temas centrales de esa conferencia fue el compromiso con el desarrollo sostenible y específicamente con los objetivos.
Okay, Armando, gracias. So I don't know if you understood him. he mentioned three main challenges. One would be how to really have to get inter and transdisciplinary approach or work in university. This, I mean, he mentioned that in South America, universities failed to get this interdisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach. And the second challenge was how to get all the teachers, professors engaged in the environment. He mentioned that the interest and the commitment of the university community has increased during last. There has been some progress. I mean, there is this commitment from the teaching or the academic university community, and the third challenge is the commitment of the leading structure in the universities, the board of director or the president, and I mean, while he mentioned that the first challenge was still it's a huge challenge that needs to be addressed, there is a progress in the other two. Okay, and so the board, the university is fully committed with the SDGs. It is more or less the three challenges that Orlando mentioned. Okay, and then we go to Accreditation. Please, could you tell us which are the main challenges to implement the SDGs in higher education in Africa, in the region? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I also want to thank the Executive Secretary of GOMI and his brilliant team. It's a privilege and an honor, to be part of this expert group. There is so much to learn and so much to do. Thank you. I'm very happy to be in your beautiful country. And yes, to go to the question, that the chair has asked, which are the main challenges to implement the Sustainable Development Goals in higher education in my context, in my country? Yeah, I just put up a list there, and I started with the disconnection between the course content and the global context, because that's how do we bridge that gap? Because what we are teaching now, and if you look at most of what, almost in all the disciplines, they are disconnected from the realities that we face globally and also some of the challenges we are having nationally. So why do we have universities? Why do we go to school? Then another challenge we've had, with the implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, lecturers are not prepared and they are not motivated. They don't, it's not in their, it's like you're talking a different language. And why is this? One, the leadership, they are occupied with more pressing issues. They are thinking about the political reason, because there's a lot of political interference in the public university. You have to please the political power that is there. Otherwise, you may not be the vice chancellor. So there is, you are more concerned about that, not sustainable development goals or climate change. They are more concerned about funding. Okay, where are we going to get the money? Okay, the school is coming from, this is coming in. Sustainable development goal is not yet there. Then, for the staff, university staff and students, they are more concerned about the challenges of daily living. How am I going to get my 3 square meals? And it's real. Security. If I'm going from here to my home, am I going to be kidnapped? It's real. It's real, not theory. They are more concerned about political stability. Is there any hope for our country in the future? Where do we go? So there are more pressing things. And you are saying climate change in 50, 100 years, there may be no world. I mean, they are saying tomorrow, I'm not sure of tomorrow. So, and it's a real situation. So, the goals are not yet on the front burner. Should they be? They should. And we are coming there. Another problem is, there is limited knowledge, limited research on these issues, limited exposure to these issues, to the knowledge, because we have found out that where we have carried out advocacy. People have become more aware and more interested. So there is also the disconnection, as has been mentioned earlier. Then there's the problem of managing the integration of a constant stream of new knowledge and approaches. There's so many things that needs to be managed today. Now we're talking about global citizenship education. Yesterday it was environmental education. Next, it was education, gender mainstream education. Even it's much. And here you are as a teacher, as a lecturer, you are trying to, be on top. What's the latest in, I happen to be a law teacher, so what is the latest in contract law or evidence, law and evidence and equity? You are trying to manage that, and somebody is coming overhead and say, no, today, in the next 10 years, this is the national goal. You have to teach it. So there is a lot of challenge. It's not as easy as we think it is. Before, in the next round, I am going to share concretely one practical action that we have taken to address one of these problems. But then, this is what we see, the challenge. We are in the 21st century. Everything I've said is true about what we're going through, but then it's also true that we're in the 21st century, and we must prepare our students for the 21st century, not for yesterday. So that's where we are. So what are we doing about it? What's the solution? In the next round, Mr. Chair, I will show you some of the things.
Thank you. Thank you. So now it's time for Charles Richardson. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you all again for having us here this year. Wanted to start by recognizing that, for the most part, the speakers have laid out the problem statement pretty clearly and pretty consistently. Lack of innovation, infrastructure, lack of change. I want to give you a little bit of background on myself, just to give you a perspective on my thinking. Half my education is in the STEM area, mathematics, my undergraduate and my first master's. And my second half of my education is in business, my MBA and my doctorate. And so I'm sort of a blend of a thoughtful person. I once saw the definition of a mathematician, which is a mathematician is like a blind man in a dark room looking for a black hat that isn't there. And so, as opposed to being a very exact science, it's a very imaginative science. Then the pragmatic side of me as a business person says, what are we going to do about it? And essentially, higher ed, apparently all across the world, is suffering from a lack of innovation. And yet it feels that it's the only industry that is not going to have to change. All the infrastructure things that we've mentioned already are problems for universities. We tend to think of the large universities, Harvard, Yale, they don't depend on enrollment. Their business model is supported by their endowment. Most other schools in the United States are smaller, 3,000 students, liberal arts institutions, and they worry about enrollment every single day. But yet they decline to notice the reason for the lack of enrollment, which is parents such as myself. I have one son graduating from college this year, the next one's going in next year. And we want many things for them, including not a job, but a life and a career. And so the debate about in higher ed of the history, philosophy versus the business and science is really a false argument. They need to be able to think, and they need to be able to do. Not only to do today, but to do in a world 20, 30 years from now where we cannot even imagine what the jobs look like and what they'll be doing. So they have to be very flexible. Is our education teaching them to be flexible? Most times not. So how do we motivate the universities? I think one way is fear. You might close tomorrow if you don't satisfy the customer. And typically higher ed individuals don't like the word customer, but yet we have them. My family is a customer. And as I look at my students, I know that their families are customers and we need to fulfill their needs in terms of achieving a degree. Students have told me, no one's asked me how I like to learn. So we stand up in the front of the room and lecture for an hour. And I recently talked with a colleague who was not concerned about students falling asleep. The issue was the professor falling asleep. And it was hard for me to get my hands around the method of teaching that would allow you to fall asleep in your classroom. And so these are the kind of problems that we're dealing with. So there is fear. The school might close. There's also the carrot as opposed to the stick. If you develop a new course or you work with colleagues in other disciplines, you may get rewarded. The ultimate reward, I think, is making this type of activity embedded in your tenure consideration. It's not that tenure is a bad thing, but once many faculty get tenure, they cease to innovate. Yet as senior professors, they should be the ones who do the most innovation. So in a nutshell, my effort as a business person would be to create an environment where we have more of a business attitude, because higher education is a business. It's a special business, and align ourselves with the needs of the customers and develop products that provide them the best solution for their money, which is a lot of money nowadays. It's not uncommon for a very small school to charge $50,000, $60,000 a year in America, which is a lot of money.
Thank you. If you allow me, we are going to give the floor for one or two questions from the audience regarding what has been said now, and then we're going to the second part of the session, which will be the presentation of a concrete example. Do you have any comment, any question about? Okay, the microphone is, yeah.
Understood, and I would say as opposed to either or, yes and, because I had this conversation recently on campus with a member of our board, and I was mentioning that I thought students needed more information about business, and maybe we would have a minor or a specialization for all students. And the board member said, well, I don't know about that. I think it'd be better to have an ethics minor. Well, what makes you think that businesses and ethics can be together? And so I asked her if she had ever heard of the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profits. Yes, you make money, but you can't make money to the sacrifice either of the environment or employees and people. So they can both exist, and I think that speaks volumes to the business mindset, which has got a very bad reputation, and I think probably America is one of the leaders in that field in terms of how the businesses are not concerned about the environment, not concerned about employees, and therefore get a bad name. So I wouldn't disagree with you, but I think we need to change the perception of what responsibilities for businesses are, particularly in higher ed, because they clearly serve the community.
Any other question or comment? I have the microphone here, just in case. It can be in Spanish, Catalan, English. If not, last chance. No? Okay. So let's go for the second round, which is we would like to highlight us about one good practice, one good experience, on a good response to those challenges that you presented. You know, una experiencia, buena práctica para resolver uno de los retos. Okay, so we are going to follow the same order. So please, you can start.
Thank you. As I mentioned, RAID, my organization, has established in 2012 the Egyptian Sustainable Development Forum, which is a civil society entity which supports the government and other stakeholders, including universities, in integrating sustainability in strategies and plans and so on. Now we have established partnerships with 18 Egyptian universities. Through these partnerships, most of them now they have committees for sustainable development, Those committees they include students, educators, and administration staff. They're looking into how to implement the SDGs within their universities, and also they are members in the local committees for sustainable development on the governorate level. So they are trying to do something. Actually, because we are a regional organization, we replicated this model of forums in other countries, and now we have fora in 5 countries, 5 Arab countries, and they are adopted by the League of Arab States. So their governments, they know now that they have these entities in their countries. This is one thing. With the universities, we have a partnership with one of the universities in Fayoum, in Governorate, with civil society, the ministries, local authorities, and private sector to have a bike sharing model for university students and staff. I know bike sharing is normal in Europe and maybe the States, but in our country it's a unique model, and it is initiated by the civil society with the university. And as a result of this model, the government they announced that they're supporting this model, and they want to replicate it in all Egyptian universities. So this is one model of how due to partnerships and the role of civil society and universities on how to implement some of the SDGs. Another model that now two universities, they have programs on SDGs and renewable energy, specifically for the installation of biogas units, and they provide certificates for startups, for engineers to have their own small-scale businesses on expanding the installation of biogas units in rural areas. So I think we're getting there. We're trying. We're having some concrete steps, and we are going to continue. Thank you.
So, but you are the point is that you are making this interface, playing an interface role between universities, civil society, just working also with. Okay. So, Orlando, por favor, un caso, una experiencia, un ejemplo.
Sí, sobre cada uno de los 3 temas que hablé. El primero que les señalé es la necesidad de trabajo interdisciplinario, de los cuales pues hay conciencia de esa necesidad hace mucho tiempo, pero en la práctica se ha avanzado poco o nada. Solamente, y ahí insisto en que yo soy pesimista, y una experiencia personal. En los años 90 trabajé en una facultad de estudios interdisciplinarios en la Universidad Javeriana en Bogotá, y la idea era avanzar. Bueno, esa experiencia en esa universidad duró 10 años. La disolvieron porque el argumento era que todas las facultades deberían ser interdisciplinarias, pero justamente se hizo todo lo contrario. Lo que se ha avanzado algo es que algunas universidades han creado grupos de investigación interdisciplinarios, pero eso son casos aislados y no la tendencia. Así que en ese aspecto yo sigo siendo bastante pesimista, más optimista en los otros aspectos. En la tarea de involucrar más a los profesores, a todos los staff académico de las universidades en los temas de ambiente y de sustentabilidad, hemos avanzado bastante. La propia red que yo coordino tiene un trabajo importante en ese sentido. Reunimos 26 redes universitarias en temas ambientales y de sustentabilidad, y trabajamos con 442 universidades de 15, 16 países de América Latina, y a través de ellas llegamos a un número muy importante de académicos. Entonces allí hay un esfuerzo significativo de trabajar para promover estos temas, y nuestro énfasis en los últimos años es objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Y el tercer tema, creo que se avanza bastante más, es el compromiso a nivel más alto directivo de las universidades. En América Latina prácticamente todos los manifiestos, todos los compromisos institucionales plantean estos temas y ya prácticamente ningún rector o vicerrector de universidad desconoce o podría decir que lo desconoce o que no hay un compromiso institucional. Entonces ahí hemos avanzado de manera significativa.
Gracias. Want you to translate regarding the first, he mentioned three main challenges. Everyone, the first one was how to create interdisciplinary work in the universities, and he mentioned it before that they failed in order to have this interdisciplinarity, and well, they have managed to create some interdisciplinary working groups, but with a limited, very limited impact. Regarding the second challenge was how to engage lecturers and staff. The point is that he highlighted that the example of the Alliance for Ibero-American University Networks for Sustainability in the Environment. That he's a coordinator of this network. This network involves 26 university networks and more than 400 universities in South America. So this is a first step, and they are just working on SDGs. And the final, regarding the third challenge, that was how to engage the top level in the universities on the SDGs. He mentioned that at this moment, every president or chair of the universities in Ibero-America know very well. Everyone knows very well the existence of the SDGs, and so there are plenty of commitments, manifestos, etc. Towards the SDGs. This would be I think that they summarize what you have said. And now we go for Bessie, sorry, please give us an example of what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I gave you earlier on when we started a list of some of the challenges we're having, and the first one was the one that had to do with the disconnect between the course content, what we're teaching, and the realities on the ground. So how do we address this problem? So I just want to quickly share with you, give you a glimpse of what we did, my organization did as we worked with university. We wrote to a number of universities. And the issue, we picked just one goal, goal 13 of climate change. How do you integrate it into your course? How do you begin to address the disconnect? Yeah, so what needs to happen with the Sustainable Development Goals is that when we teach, we need to teach in the light of all these goals. Somehow, every lecturer, teacher, we need to be able to ask ourselves, is your discipline 21st century compliant? Is your course SDG sensitive? What are you teaching for? I mean, you have to. So each lecturer, despite whatever the national regulation says, you have a responsibility to prepare the student before you for the future. It's not about changing the content. You're not changing the content. You're just teaching your content in a responsible way, in a deeper way. So we wanted to find out where the teachers, because the starting place is for you as a lecturer to know where you are. What are you teaching? What impact is it having? And interestingly, we decided to have a survey. So this university that agreed to work with us, we picked oil and gas law because I'm a lawyer. So we wanted, first of all, I wanted to start with law courses because I am at home there. So, and we now picked oil and gas law because oil and gas is very vital for my country. My country, Nigeria, if I show you this, I mean, we have refineries, oil. If you take oil out, it's dead economically. And one of the most important things the Paris Agreement said is that we have to begin to think of doing away with fossil fuels. So if we're not teaching it, if our students don't understand the future that is coming or that could come, and as a lawyer studying oil and gas law, you don't know climate change, so what are you teaching for? All right, so the first thing was to talk with the lecturers. Oh, how are you? This is the project, explain the project, and I said, do you include climate change in your course? Yes, of course. We do climate change, yes, and all. I said, wow, fantastic. Okay, let's administer the survey, and we administered the survey. After the survey, so just explain to you, we got the result. Then we had an intervention. The intervention was a workshop, climate change workshop. And after that, it closed out. So I'll just race with this. So these are pictures from the survey with the students, the law students, when we had the survey. Some of the results that I'd like to share with you. When it came to, these are oil and gas law students. We had year 5 students had done oil and gas law. They had done environmental law. Year 4 students was doing oil and gas law. So we asked them to the question, environmental issues that is of most important concerns. I mean, look at where climate change is. You can see, for those who have done environmental law, have done oil and gas law, year 5. Year 4, they are doing, I mean, they didn't even, climate change is nowhere. And they are studying, yeah. Then if you look at the next chart, it shows that students ran, poverty and economic issues were more important than climate change. Or in oil and gas law, yeah, what about the effect of oil and gas law? Many of them, did not know. Then on another slide, this one has to do with the, where do they get their information from? Do they get most of the information from the classroom? You can see the percentage that said most of the information is gotten from the internet, not very, very limited from the classroom. Then 51% of the year 4 students and 49% of the year 5 students claimed not to have received any formal teaching on climate change. And this is this year. This is this year. Yeah, and so on. And I'm just going through because of the limited time. So what we now did, you can see this after the no, this question is important because we said in oil and gas law itself, how many times has it been mentioned? Are you familiar with climate change coming up? And you can see the result. I mean, 52 says seldom, and so we really have an alarming situation, and it's something that everybody saw. The teachers saw it, the students saw it, and they knew something needed to happen. So we now had an intervention. We had a climate change workshop for them, gave the lecturer tools to help him integrate, and then they had a few more classes, just a few more. Then we did another survey, and we could begin to see the impact a little bit. So this just shows that, and why we decided to do these steps, a lot of people, they need to see to be convinced. Because these are professors. How can you tell a professor that, oh, you're not teaching well? No. Just do the survey with the students, from the students. If you've taught them well, the students should have the basic knowledge. So with this, they saw that something needed to happen. So this process continues. The faculty is going to be involved, and the National Union of Universities, they will be involved, and hopefully some positive things would happen. And just a minute to run through the implication. This clearly shows that the gap between oil and gas law as taught locally and in its contents globally there is a gap. And this may be the case with many disciplines. It also demonstrates that lecturers are willing to reform. They are willing, And lastly, our courses need to be redesigned to be more professionally strong, academically rigorous, with roots in all the dimensions of sustainability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you to you. And now, Charles, do you illustrate us with an example or with practice? Or
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, when the SDGs came out a few years ago, I was, as an advocate for sustainability, I was very pleased because you hear the discussion and argument about climate change and whether it exists or not. I said, well, you've got a whole bunch, if you put that aside, and you've got these other interesting things like education, gender equality, and things that just seem to make sense at a humane point of view. But in talking to people, I found that they sometimes seemed overwhelmed by so many choices. What do I do about this? So as a dean, I'm sort of in the middle. I've got contact with students. I've got faculty that report to me but do not necessarily listen to what I say. And I have access to senior administration. So when I talk to students and they want to know about why should we worry about sustainability, and they say things, well, when we replace the light bulbs in the building, we lower our electric bill. And when we lower our electric bill, the tuition goes down. We change the shower heads in the toilets and things in the bathrooms. And when we reduce water usage, your bill goes down. We recycle. Instead of paying for garbage to be taken away, we have them pay us for recyclable goods, and your tuition goes down. So they pretty much get the idea real quickly that sustainability is a good thing. And I've always felt as an administrator that the element of care is a part of my, end quote, management style, and people don't feel cared for. It's hard for them to care for someone else. So I find out, what do the faculty care about? So they might want to go to a conference, and they might want to do this, or engage in a community activity. So I will exchange. If you'll do this for me, incorporate sustainability in your class, team teach, change your course, you can go to that conference. And it generally seems to work once they get over the idea that the dean really cares about them, because that's different. The higher level administration, I talk to them about branding, because as a marketing educator, all companies have a brand. And again, I'm back to the university as an entity. You must have a brand in order for consumers to want to consume your goods. And so what are we known for? Are we known for simply just this sort of castle on a hill with a lot of smart people? Or are we going to address the issue like my wife and I? Your son or daughters will get a good education, but they'll also learn to be very productive citizens in the world. We will take care of them. It's safe here. And the things that beyond the curriculum families truly care about. And so I focus on caring for my people, whether that be students, my bosses, or faculty, and trying to get to what makes sense for them. If we have a good brand, we'll have to really turn people away, and that makes administrators and the board happy.
Okay. So thank you to all of you for your experience. I am the bad guy in the room, because although the debate examples are fantastic, and we are always open to debate, time is time, and time is running. So I would like to thank you to close the session here and to give the floor to Thomas. But thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. 5 minutes are only 5 minutes. So thank you for all your efforts summarizing all the content that you have in mind. And now I'm going to give the floor to Thomas Jurgensen from the European Senior Policy Coordinator at the European University Association, who will give us an overview. Okay. So, last but not least, we have Thomas from the European University Association, Thomas Jurgensen. Okay. And so he's going to provide us with, he's also a member of the expert group on high-level education, sustainable and the SDGs. So we ask him to give us an overview and somehow a wrap-up of this session. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And as the other experts, I'd like to thank Guni for the opportunity to be a member of this expert group. It's really a privilege to have access to a global conversation about these issues. And I just hope that we give you what we're here for, the kind of input to take this forward with the whole network, because the idea is, of course, not that a couple of people sit and get informed, but that this gets traction. And I think Guni is a good place to do that. And I'll be short in my wrap up, and I think I'll just strike a little bit of a positive note, because it's very easy and probably also very correct to talk about all the things that could be better and all the things that are wrong. But I think I come out of here glass half full kind of. So what I noticed, if I just go back to the morning and the discussions we had, is that for me, at least personally, I think that there was an increased attention to governance. We talked about goal 16 kind of stuff at the beginning, human rights. We talked about civil society. we talked about, I think it's very good Pastora took out the Future is Now report, which I think is something we all should have next to our bed and read, because there are some very good chapters there. So issues of good governance, issues of the regulatory framework, I'll come back to that, and that interface, that science community / society interface, which needs to be in place, and which, when you listen to many of the speakers, there are issues with connecting the curriculum. There are issues with making it. I like the idea of being 21st century compliant. I mean, there's no reason to deny these things. But I still have the glass half full, because I think that there are some pluses. If I see this from the European angle, and I connect it to some of the work we've been doing in the association, particularly regarding teaching innovation. So we came out with a big report a little more than a year ago about the Trends 2018 report about teaching innovation. And there was evidence of movement. There was clear evidence of movement in terms of engaging in more innovative, more engaging teaching methods. Problem-based learning really being one of the big hits. Problem or challenge-based learning. I know that within the community there is discussions about what you should use. I like problem-based learning. So I think that is a positive thing. You can see there is movement in this field. On the research side, there is, from work that I've also been engaged in regarding innovation, there is an increased idea about impact. And I think from what we at least hear, also within the researcher community, a willingness and also a desire to have impact of what you do. And that is across the board. That's of course strong in engineering. People work with concrete problems, but I think, and I think that was also mentioned in the beginning, humanities and social science. And when we talk about governance and these interfaces, we are of course talking about what we call in a very fluffy term, social innovation. How are we going to have the kind of good governance, the kind of societal structures that actually allow us to go towards sustainability? Where I personally think we're just not going far enough. We're tweaking the system, but we're not having systemic innovative thoughts about what are the issues. But as I said, that's the positive things. There's an increased, at all level, an increased attention to impact, and we have movement in teaching innovation. At least in Europe, we can see that learning innovation is better as a term. On the negative side, and I think this came up a couple of times, the regulatory frameworks. Very concrete things. Accreditation was mentioned, the difficulty to get out of disciplinary silos, of silos of curricula. We heard about law. I think it's particularly an issue in professional studies, where you also have the societies and the professions that can, not necessarily is, but it can be a conservative break, because you need to have the accreditation, you need to have the approval of your study. And we know that's an issue. I don't know if with people from ACA in the room, but we know particularly that things like program accreditation can be an issue. Accreditation of researchers according to the disciplinary achievements can be an issue. But again, we have a solution. We have, again, in Europe, there is a trend towards letting go of the rigid program-based accreditation and say, okay, universities do programs and we're sure they do them well. We assume that universities have quality assurance internally, that if a program is not what it's supposed to be, it gets closed down, and that is what we check. Let's say what we call the institutional accreditation model, and there is a trend. There is a trend. We had changes going towards that in Slovakia, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, and a lot of countries. And it's not only because society has discovered that universities can actually do things by themselves. It's just a lot cheaper. It's cheaper for everybody to do that. So that there are, there is an issue with the regulatory framework. I think there are solutions. The same, and that's probably more difficult, goes for the framework around research assessment and career assessment. About the very strong focus on impact factor that locks people down in disciplinary silos, and we have some pretty scary evidence coming out about that, if it's not already out, about research assessment and about what is there in terms of career progression, what you're assessed on, and it is really the high impact, way higher than teaching, much higher. So we have our open science champions that we work with in that field, but that is an issue. That is an issue. So I think we know what the issues are. I think we know what to do. I think we know what to do on the grand scheme of things. That we need to have. It's an E-way hobby horse, but it's true. More institutional autonomy, so that we get out of these very rigid systems that were built for something else. And I think in Europe we could actually learn about the decolonization of how things are done, because, well, okay, we were mainly the colonizers, but the ideas behind why do we do things the way we do them? Why do we have these rigid frameworks that often prevents us from doing things? We can ask ourselves that question, and I think much of the solution is in autonomy with accountability. That's clear. Autonomy with accountability. So that's one issue. So again, it's positive. We know where the problems are, but we also have, for our small sector, pretty good ideas what the solutions can be, systemic and as well as practical. I think there was a good example we heard from Mathematician now about the things you really do within the course with the individual students. I think that was a very good that was a very good example of how you could do things. So where does this leave us? I think we make a lot of. I wanted to make one point as well about civil society, actually, before I run off. I want to make a point about civil society. I think our sector is curious, because in some ways we are civil society. In some ways we are, but in some ways we're not, because here we are publicly funded state institution. Many of the researchers still in Europe are civil servants. So we are there in a strange place between the state institutions and civil society. And I think that needs to be recognized. But I also think that being a partner with civil society is extremely important, because we get that engagement. And I think, given the political history of Catalonia, you know the ideas of anarchism. If you don't feel it on your body, you don't learn it. You need to feel the class struggle on your body, otherwise you don't have consciousness. But there's something true about that. That engagement, knowing that we have a special place. We're not completely civil society. We're not completely state institution. So I wanted to round up around that and saying, I think the glass is half full if we really become operational and say we have precise problems, regulatory frameworks, research assessment, systemic problems. We have problems internally, but we need to identify them. That could be awareness of students, it could be awareness of staff, it could be understaffing, and we need to address them very, very concretely. And then I think there's space, a lot of space for realistic improvement. So that's it.
So
It is difficult to add something new, and because you provide us with a brilliant summary of the privileged views that you have from the European University Association. I was asked to make the closure of the session, which I mean we should be here all the members of the expert groups because it makes sense to be. But I am here alone, so I'm going to let's say I promise you to be brief. The point is, okay, first of all, thank you for being here. You know, debates are important, but now the time is for action, and we are always just mixing these two dynamics, reflection plus action. And the most important thing is to have action, not only reflection, and it's sometimes difficult to move from this point. We see very positive things, ideas coming from universities and from the research centers. We have good examples. However, I mean, we are in a starting point. I mean, there is a lot of things to do, as there are a lot of things to do in the business community and in public administrations. The point is how to be transformative, not to be promoters of this SDG washing that Karmawal mentioned before. I mean, we need to make something real. And talking about the 2030 agenda is a huge issue because we have 17 SDGs covering everything. So we need to make sure that we go right to the point and we try to make changes. You universities are responsible for the future, and is the 2030 agenda. The resolution's title is the 2030 agenda transforming the world. Sorry, yeah. But we need a future, and you are responsible for transforming this future and transforming the world that we will have to transform our capacities or the skills of people that will lead the transition towards a sustainable development and a sustainable world. So there are a lot of things to do. All of us are responsible for this transition. I'm working an interface organization, like the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development. It's dealing with universities, scientists, the scientific community, policymakers, and civil society, and we know the importance of these interfaces and the difficulties we have in order to understand our languages, our priorities that should be the same, but we have different times, frameworks, etc. So good luck. I think we're going to succeed. So when I try to be, I always live in this very dual feeling of being optimistic and pessimistic. The idea is, let's start, let's continue. Anything is perfect, but we are in a good path, and we need, using the SDG 17, we need to establish good alliances, smaller and bigger alliances, to change things and especially to build this future that everyone wants for our future generations. So thank you very much. Please remember that we're going to meet in March for the big conference that we're going to organize here in Barcelona. That UNI will organize here in Barcelona on the SDGs. And so thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. With this one very important thing also always is to enjoy life and then to continue. You make a brilliant. Are you going to write this institution? Are you going to share it? No, they were excellent. You made an excellent summary. So you write it.
Actually, there's a small article in it. So for a better time.
We are sharing. When I see from people to go from this level to the original.